Hello!
And welcome to Larry's Library!
They seem to enjoy that, don't they? Welcome to Larry's Library. Tonight we're going to be reading two chapters, chapters 29 and 30 of Swiss Family Robinson. They've survived the rainy winter. Chapter 29, Spring, Spinning, Salt Mine. I can hardly describe our joy when, after many tedious and gloomy weeks of rain, the sky began to brighten, the sun to dart its benign rays on the humid earth, the winds to be lulled, and the state of the air became mild and serene. We issued from our dreary hovels with joyful shouts, and walked round our habitation, breathing the enlivening, balmy ether, while our eyes were regaled with the beauteous verdure beginning to shoot forth on every side. Our summer occupations commenced by arranging and thoroughly cleaning Falcon's Nest, the order and neatness of which the rain and dead leaves blown by the wind had disturbed. In other respects, however, it was not injured, and in a few days we rendered it fit for our reception. The stairs were cleared, the rooms between the roots reoccupied, and we were left with leisure to proceed to other employments. My wife lost not a moment in resuming the process of her flax. Our sons hastened to lead the cattle to the fresh pastures, whilst it was my task to carry the bundles of flax into the open air, where, by heaping stones together, I contrived an oven sufficiently commodious to dry it well. The same evening we all set to work to peel, and afterwards to beat and strip off the bark, and lastly to comb it with my carding machine, which fully answered the purpose. I took this laborious task on myself, and drew out such distaffs full of long, soft flax ready for spinning, that my enraptured wife ran to embrace me to express her thankfulness, requesting me to make her a wheel without delay, that she might enter upon her favorite work. At an early period of my life I had practiced turnery for my amusement. Now, however, I was unfortunately destitute of the requisite utensils. But as I had not forgotten the arrangement and component parts of a spinning wheel and reel, I, by repeated endeavors, found means to accomplish those two machines to her satisfaction, and she fell so eagerly to spinning as to allow herself no leisure even for a walk, and scarcely time to dress our dinners. Our first visit was to Tent House, and here we found the ravages of winter more considerable than even at Falcon's Stream. The tempest and rain had beaten down the tent, carried away a part of the sailcloth, and made such havoc among our provisions that by far the largest portion was spotted with mildew, and the remainder could be only saved by drying it instantly. Luckily, our handsome pinnace had been for the most part spared. It was still at anchor, ready to serve us in case of need, but our tub-boat was in too shattered a state to be of any further service. In looking over the stores, we were grieved to find the gunpowder, of which I had left 3 barrels in the tent, the most damaged. The contents of 2 were rendered wholly useless. I thought myself fortunate in finding the remaining one in tolerable condition, and derived from this great and irreparable loss a cogent motive to fix upon our winter quarters, where our stores, our only wealth, would not be exposed to such cruel dilapidations. Fritz and Jack
Daddy?
were constant, yes,
What are dilapidations?
being messed up.
Oh, I got a joke.
No, now's not a good time for a joke. I'm reading. Fritz and Jack were constant in their endeavors to make me undertake the excavation of the rock, but I had no hopes of success. Robinson Crusoe found a spacious cavern that merely required arrangement. No such cavity appeared in our rock, which bore the aspect of extreme solidity and impenetrableness, so that with our limited powers 3 or 4 summers would scarcely suffice to execute the design. Still, the earnest desire of a more substantial habitation to defend us from the elements perplexed me incessantly, and I resolved to make at least the attempt of cutting out a recess that should protect the gunpowder.
What does earnest mean?
It means as I really want to do it.
Mm-hmm. Then why is there a kid named Ernest?
Because that's a different Ernest. I resolved to make at least the attempt of cutting out a recess that should protect the gunpowder, the most valuable of all our treasures. I accordingly set off one day, accompanied by my 2 boys, leaving their mother at her spinning with Ernest and Francis. We took with us pickaxes, chisels, hammers, and iron levers to try what impression we could make on the rock. I chose a part nearly perpendicular and much better situated than our tent. The view from it was enchanting, for it embraced the whole range of Safety Bay, the banks of Jackal's River and Family Bridge, and many of the picturesque projections of the rocks. I marked out with charcoal the opening we wished to make, and we began the heavy toil of piercing the quarry. We made so little progress the first day that in spite of our courage we were tempted to relinquish the undertaking. We persevered, however, and my hope was somewhat revived as I perceived the stone was of a softer texture as we penetrated deeper. I concluded from this that the ardent rays of the sun striking upon the rock had hardened the external layer, and that the stone within would increase in softness as we advanced. When I had cut about a foot in depth, we could loosen it with a spade like dried mud. This determined me to proceed with a double order, and my boys assisted me with a spirit and zeal beyond their years. After a few days of assiduous labor, we measured the opening and found we had already advanced 7 feet into the rock. Fritz removed the fragments in a barrow and discharged them in a line before the place to form a sort of terrace. I applied my own labor to the upper part to enlarge the aperture. Jack, the smallest of the three, was able to get in and cut away below. He had with him a long iron bar sharpened at the end, which he drove in with a hammer to loosen a piece at a time. Suddenly he bawled out, It is pierced through, father! Fritz, I have pierced it through! Ha ha, Master Jack, it is jokes again. But let us hear what have you pierced. Is it the mountain? Not peradventure your hand or foot, Jack, cried I. No, it is the mountain, the rocks resounding with his usual shout of joy. Huzzah, huzzah, I have pierced the mountain. Fritz now ran to him. Come, let us see then. It is no doubt the globe at least you have pierced, said he in a bantering tone. You should have pushed on your tool boldly till you reached Europe, which they say is under our feet. I should have been glad to peep into that hole. Well then, peep you may, but I hardly know what you will see. Come and look how far the iron has gone in, and tell me if it is all my boasting. Come hither, father, said Fritz. This is really extraordinary. His iron bar seems to have got to a hollow place. See, it can be moved in every direction. I approached, thinking the incident worth attention. I took hold of the bar, which was still in the rock, and working it about, I made a sufficient aperture for one of my sons to pass, and I observed that in reality the rubbish fell within the cavity, which I judged from the falling of the stones was not much deeper than the part we stood on. My 2 lads offered to go in together and examine it. This, however, I forbade. I even made them remove from the opening, as I smelled the foul air that issued abundantly from it, and began myself to feel giddiness in consequence of having gone too near, so that I was compelled to withdraw quickly and inhale a purer air. Everybody wave hi to Uncle Carrie. Under my direction, the boys now hastened to gather some dry moss, which they made into bundles. They then struck a light and set fire to them and threw the moss blazing into the opening. But, as I had foreseen, the fire was extinguished at the very entrance, thus proving that the air within was highly mephitic. I now saw that it was to be rarefied by another and more effectual method. I recollected that we had brought from the vessel a chest that was full of grenades, rockets, and other fireworks, which had been shipped for the purpose of making signals, as well as for amusement. I sought it hastily and took some of these, together with an iron mortar for throwing. Out of it I laid a train of gunpowder and set fire to the end, which reached to where we stood. A general explosion took place, and an awful report reverberated through the dark recess. The lighted grenades flew about on all sides like brilliant meteors, rebounding and bursting with a terrific sound. We then set in the rockets, which had also a full effect. They hissed in the cavity like flying dragons, disclosing to our astonished view its vast extent. We beheld, too, as we thought, numerous dazzling bodies that sparkled suddenly as if by magic and disappeared with the rapidity of lightning, leaving the place in total darkness. After having played off our fireworks, I tried lighted straw. To our great satisfaction, the bundles thrown in were entirely consumed. We could then reasonably hope nothing was to be feared from the air, but there still remained the danger of plunging into some abyss or of meeting with a body of water. From these considerations, I deemed it more prudent to defer our entrance into this unknown recess till we had lights to guide us through it. I dispatched Jack on the Buffalo to Falcon Stream to tell his mother and brothers of our discovery, directing him to return with them and to bring all the tapers that were left. My intention was to tie them together to the end of a stick and proceed with it lighted to examine our cavity. In 3 or 4 hours we saw them coming up in our car of state. I immediately lighted some of the tapers, but not together as I had intended, I preferred each taking one in his right hand, an implement in his left, another taper in his pocket, flint and steel, and thus we entered the rock in solemn procession. The most beautiful and magnificent spectacle presented itself. The sides of the cavern sparkled like diamonds. The light from our tapers was reflected from all parts and had the effect of a grand illumination. Innumerable crystals of every length and shape hung from the top of the vault, which, uniting with those of the sides, formed pillars, altars, entablatures, and a variety of other figures, composing the most splendid masses. We might have fancied ourselves in the palace of a fairy or an illuminated temple. The floor was level, covered with a white and very fine sand, as if purposely strewed, and so dry that I could not see the least mark of humidity anywhere. All this led me to hope the spot would be healthy, convenient, and eligible for our proposed residence. I now formed a particular conjecture as to the nature of the crystallizations shooting out on all sides, and especially from the arch roof. They could scarcely be of that species of rock crystals produced by the slow filtering of water falling in drops and coagulating in succession, and seldom found in excavations exhibiting so dry a nature, nor even with so many of the crystals perpendicular and perfectly smooth. I was impatient to evince the truth or falsehood of this idea by an experiment, and discovered with great joy, on breaking a portion of one of them, that I was in a grotto of sal gem, that is, fossil or rock salt, found in the earth in solid crystallized masses, generally above a bed of spar or gypsum, and surrounded by layers of fossils or rock. The discovery of this fact, which no longer admitted a doubt, pleased us all exceedingly. The shape of their crystals, their little solidity, and finally their saline taste were decisive evidence. Many schemes were formed for converting this magnificent grotto into a convenient and agreeable mansion for our abode. We had possession of the most eligible premises. The sole business was to turn them to the best account, and how to effect this was our unceasing theme. Some voted for our immediate establishment there, but they were opposed by more sagacious counsel, and it was resolved that Falcon's Stream should still be our headquarters till the end of the year. Chapter 30, House in the Salt Rock, Turtles. The lucky discovery of a previously existing cavern in the rock had, as must be supposed, considerably lessened our labor. Excavation was no longer requisite. I had more room than was wanted for the construction of our dwelling. To render it habitable was the present object, and to do this did not seem a difficult task. The upper bed of the rock in front of the cavern, through which my little Jack had dug so easily, was of a soft nature, and to be worked with moderate effort. I hoped also that, being now exposed to the air and heat of the sun, it would become by degrees as hard and compact as the first layer that had given me so much trouble. From this consideration I began, while it retained its soft state, to make openings for the doors and the windows of the front. This I regulated by the measurement of those I had fixed in my winding staircase, which I had removed for the purpose of placing them in our winter tenement. I had previously marked out the openings to be cut for the frames, which were received into grooves for greater convenience and solidity. I took care not to break the stone taken from the apertures, or to at least preserve it in large pieces, and these I cut with the saw and chisel into oblongs 1.5 inches in thickness to serve as tiles. I laid them in the sun and was gratified in seeing they hardened quickly. I then removed them, and my sons placed them in order against the side of the rock till they were wanted for our internal arrangements. When I could enter the cavern freely with a good doorway, and it was sufficiently lighted by the windows, I erected a partition for the distribution of our apartments and other conveniences. The extent of the place afforded ample room for my design, and even allowed me to leave several spaces in which salt and other articles could be stored. I laid out the interior in the following manner. A very considerable space was first partitioned off in 2 divisions. The one on the right was appropriated to our residence. That on the left was to contain kitchen, stables, and workroom. At the end of the second division, where windows could not be placed, the cellar and storeroom were to be formed. The whole separated by partition boards with doors of communication, so as to give us a pleasant and comfortable abode. The side we designed to lodge in was divided into 3 apartments. The first next the door was the bedroom for my wife and me. The second, a dining parlor, and at last a bedroom for the boys. As we had only 3 windows, we put one in each sleeping room, and the third was fixed in the kitchen where my wife would often be. A grating for the present fell to the lot of our dining room, which then, too cold, was to be exchanged for one of the other apartments. I contrived a good fireplace in the kitchen near the window. I pierced the rock a little above, and 4 planks nailed together, and passing through this opening, answered the purpose of a chimney. We made the workroom near the kitchen of sufficient dimensions for the performance of undertakings of some magnitude. It served also to keep our cart and sledge in. Lastly, the stables, which were formed into 4 compartments to separate the different species of animals, occupied all the bottom of the cavern on this side. On the other were the cellar and magazine. The long stay we made at Tent House during these employments furnished us an opportunity of perceiving several advantages we had not reckoned upon. Immense turtles were often seen on the shore, where they deposited their eggs in the sand, and they regaled us with a rich treat. But, extending our wishes, we thought of getting possession of the turtles themselves for livestock, and of feasting on them whenever we pleased. As soon as we saw one on the sands, one of my boys was dispatched to cut off its retreat. Meanwhile, we approached the animal, and quietly, without doing it any injury, turned it on its back, then passed a long cord through the shell, and tied the end of it to a stake which we fixed close to the edge of the water. This done, we set the prisoner on its legs again. It hastened into the sea, but could not go beyond the end of the cord. Apparently, it was all the happier finding food with more facility along shore than out at sea, and we enjoyed the idea of being able to take it when wanted. A number of sea dogs came into Safety Bay and descended the river in search of prey, sporting in water along shore without evincing any fear of us. The fish presented no attraction to the palate, but its skin, tanned and dressed, makes excellent leather. I was in great need of it for straps and harnesses, to make saddles for Fritz and Jack to ride the Onagra and Buffalo, and in short for our own use to cut up into soles, belts, and pantaloons, of which articles we much wanted a fresh supply. Besides, I knew the fat yielded good lamp oil that might be substituted for tapers in the long evenings of winter, and that it would be further useful in tanning and rendering the leather pliant. At this time I likewise made some improvements in our sledge to facilitate the carrying of stores from Falcon Stream to our dwelling in the rock at Tent House. I raised it on 2 beams on axle trees, at the extremities of which I put on the 4 gun carriage wheels I had taken off the cannon from the vessel. By this alteration I obtained a light and convenient vehicle of moderate height, on which boxes and casks could be placed. Pleased with the operations of the week, we set out all together with cheerful hearts for Falcon's Stream to pass our Sunday there, and once more offer our pious thanks to the Almighty for all the benefits he had bestowed upon his defenseless creatures. And that's the end of Chapter 30. Chapter 31 we'll do tomorrow, Saturday. New fishery, new experiments, new discoveries, and house. This has been Larry's Library. Thank you. Wait, what do you want to say? What do you want to say, Tara?
Okay, so now I'm gonna tell you, Jeff. Okay, I am not a dolph.
You're not a dolph. This
Tell
has
you
been Larry's
oaf.
Library. Thank
That's
you.
what Sokka says.